There's a children's book called Frog and Toad Together that speaks as much to adults as to children. In it, Arnold Lobel recounts a day in the life of Toad. As the day began, Toad sat up in bed and wrote on a piece of paper a list of things to do today. Then he wrote, "Wake up." As he'd already done that, he was able to cross it out straight away. Then he wrote on the paper a plan for the rest of his day. Eat breakfast, get dressed, go to Frog's house, take walk with Frog, eat lunch, take nap, play games with Frog, eat supper, go to sleep. He got up and worked his way through the list, crossing off each item as it was completed. When he got to the house of his friend Frog, he announced, "My list tells me that we will go for a walk." So they did, and Toad crossed "Take walk with Frog" off his list. Then disaster struck. A strong wind blew the list out of Toad's hand. Frog was all for running after the list to catch it, but poor Toad just could not do that. It was not on his list of things to do. So, while Toad sat there immobilized, Frog ran after the list, mile after mile, but in vain. He just could not catch it, and returned empty-handed to the disconsolate Toad. Toad could not remember any of the things that were left on his list to do, so he just sat and did nothing. Frog sat with him. Eventually, Frog pointed out that it was getting dark, and that they should go to sleep. "Go to sleep!" Toad shouted triumphantly. "That was the last thing on my list." So Toad wrote on the ground with a stick, "Go to sleep." Then he crossed it out, delighted that he could at last cross out his whole day. And then Frog and Toad went to sleep. Poor one-mode Toad. Yet many of us often behave just like Toad, as if doing were the only mental mode available to us. Too often our lives seem to be little more than one long to-do list. It's not so much making to-do lists that is the problem. The problem is our sense of impending doom if we don't get through the list. That and the myopic narrowing of our lives that can result. In his book, Full Catastrophe Living, John Kabat-Zinn tells the story of a man who was taking the MBSR program as a way to prevent a recurrence of a heart attack he'd suffered 18 months earlier. His name was Peter. At 10 o'clock at night, with the floodlights on in his driveway, he found himself setting up to wash his car. Why? Because he had had the idea that he needed to wash the car at some point that day. Since it was on his to-do list, and since he'd always operated from the conviction that if something was on the list it had to get done, there was no question that he had to do it. Understandably, this attitude toward life had led to a sense of feeling driven. Peter was perpetually tense and anxious. Living his life ruled by his to-do lists harmed Peter's cardiovascular health and threatened his life. When those of us who struggle with relentless unhappiness allow our interior worlds to be ruled by our to-do lists, our emotional health is damaged. This puts our very lives at risk. Not only is the doing mode ineffective at staving off depression, but it constricts and cramps our lives so that we end up living in a tiny corner of the world available to us. Although we may not fully realize it, as human beings, every single one of us can live in the open spaciousness of the being mode far, far more than we do. The more we make that possibility real for ourselves, even in tiny ways, the more we can enrich our own lives and enhance our mental health. Is it not wise, then, to reserve our use of the doing mode for those areas of life in which it is a skillful, effective response, and instead put more of our energies into the cultivation of being? This more mindful way of being takes some time and courage, of course, but we can draw significant encouragement and inspiration from those who have engaged in exactly this kind of interior work through their participation in MBCT, keeping in mind that those formal programs lasted only 8 weeks and reduced the risk of relapse by half in people who'd been recurrently depressed. Our theories, our research, and the stories of other people's experience in their mindfulness programs all point to the importance of cultivating awareness intentionally. But in the end, all of this is still no substitute for personal experience. We each need to see for ourselves the effects of both the doing mode and the being mode on moment-to-moment quality of our lives. To develop such experience requires that we cultivate mindfulness in our daily lives. Ultimately, living with mindful awareness, grounded in the being mode of mind, is a way of being fully awake, fully alive, fully oneself, whatever and however that might turn out to be. It is not inimical to getting things done or bringing about important changes in your life or in the world. It is very much about wise doing, a doing that emerges and flows out of the domain of being, mindful doing, if you will. Here are some tips that many people in our mindfulness classes have found helpful, things you can incorporate into your daily life. When you first wake up in the morning, before you get out of bed, bring your attention to your breathing for at least 5 full breaths, letting the breath breathe itself. Notice your body posture. Be aware of how your body and mind feel when you move from lying down to sitting, to standing, to walking. Notice each time you make a transition from one posture to the next. During the day, when you hear a phone ring, a bird sing, a train pass by, laughter, a car horn, the wind, or the sound of a door closing, use it or any other sound to remind you to come fully into the here and now. Really listen, being present and awake. Several times throughout the day, take a few moments to bring your attention to your breathing for at least 5 full breaths. When you eat or drink something, take a minute and breathe. Bring awareness to seeing your food, smelling it, tasting it, chewing it, and swallowing it. Notice your body while walking or standing. Take a moment to notice your posture. Pay attention to the contact of the ground under your feet. Feel the air on your face, arms, and legs as you walk. Are you rushing to get to the next moment? Even when you are in a hurry, be with the hurrying. Check in with yourself to see whether you are making extra by telling yourself all the things that might go wrong. Bring awareness to listening and talking. Can you listen without having to agree or disagree, without falling into liking or disliking, or planning what you will say when it's your turn? Can you say what you need to say without overstating or understating it? Can you notice how your mind and body feel? Can you notice what is conveyed by your tone of voice? Is your speaking an improvement on silence? When you find yourself waiting in a line, use this time to notice standing and breathing, feeling the contact of your feet on the floor and how your body feels, bringing attention to the rising and falling of your abdomen, bringing attention to any feelings of impatience or restlessness, and holding it all in awareness. Be aware of any points of tightness in your body throughout the day. See if you can breathe into them, and as you let go of the breath, letting go of any excess tension, letting go of what you don't need. Be aware of any tension stored in your body. Is there tension in your neck, your shoulders, or in the stomach, the jaw, or your lower back? Getting to know your aversion patterns. If possible, stretch or do yoga once a day. Focus attention on your daily activities, such as brushing your teeth, brushing your hair, washing up, or putting on your shoes. Bring mindfulness to each activity. Before you go to sleep at night, take a few minutes and bring your attention to your breathing for at least 5 full breaths. It's not that difficult situations, worries, memories, people are somehow neutralized by our practice of meditation, or that we become indifferent to them. Rather, that the space we make for them when we bring present moment awareness to them is big enough for them to become only part of our experience. We may find ourselves starting to make more room in the present moment for realizing and embodying the full spectrum of who we already are, wherever we are. We may come to trust ourselves in new and different ways. We may discover that we are okay as we are, and that we can accept ourselves as we are. We may begin to feel a growing sense of gratitude for the life we already have, rather than grasping at the one we fantasize about. We may decide to accept the chance to see and to savor the wonders of the life available to us as our life is unfolding moment by moment by moment. This is the great adventure of mindfulness, the great adventure of being alive. When our minds are incessantly preoccupied with the rewards or dangers that may await us at the end of our journey, we are cutting ourselves off from the richness of life itself and from our ability to recognize in it the texture of each moment along the way. In any one moment, this may seem no greater loss, but a whole life of lost moments is a whole life lost. The tragedy for too many of us is not that our lives are too short, but that we take so long before we start to live them. The source of wisdom we discover from the practice of mindfulness, if we allow it, will eventually show us the immense and tragic suffering that stems from unawareness. It will allow us to see, to dwell in, and to treasure the deep peace that lies at the heart of each moment if we have the courage to cultivate awareness here and now. It will allow us to experience being fully alive here and now while we have the chance.